This is the Garden of English. I'm Tim Freitas, and today we're going to start our synthesis unit by checking out how to break down the prompt itself. And I've got kind of a big announcement, so you're going to want to stay tuned. We're beginning to trek through the forest of synthesis, and I am grateful to inform you that we are actually not doing this alone. Yes, it is true. The Garden of English has a sponsor for this video, and that is Parlay Ideas. And I just want to quickly mention them because you can access their content by just clicking in the affiliate link that's right down below. And their platform actually helped me immensely, particularly when learning went remote and online last year. I actually am grateful enough to be working in a school where we're in person, but when I was fully remote and online, I found Parlay, and they have really excellent stuff to offer. If you've never actually seen Parlay, I'm going to just tell you a little bit about them for just a moment before we get into what we're going to get into today, which is going to be breaking down that prompt like I mentioned before. But Parlay Ideas is an interface that allows you to run online and in-person class discussions in a way that allows you to synthesize multiple sources and synthesize the use of technology even in your conversations that happen live, but also you can move those conversations online as well, and they're all kept in one spot. And I'm going to just show you that this is more than just a conversation interface, though, because Parlay has this thing called the Parlay Universe, and this is really quite incredible because when you go to the Parlay Universe, because you can search a keyword about what you're studying in class. Let's say we're doing civil rights, and they have all of these sources that are available to you that relate to civil rights. So I put that in, and they have these things called roundtables. These are discussion assignments that are already created for you. And if I click on this discussion assignment, you're going to notice that it is given right here. Sources are laid out for you. Templates are here for you to actually work with your students. You can have multimedia sources, and you can bring that right into your classroom. And when you do so, it's going to show up just like this. And what's really awesome about this for you as a teacher, if you're a teacher watching this, is that when you have access to this whole universe and you can bring these in, you can also edit these. So let's say you love the sources, but you really want to change the prompt or you want to add your own sources to it. You bring it into your classroom, and then if you don't like a particular part of it, all you need to do is just go to it and delete it and change it. Change this, right? Save it and close, and that's actually what your kids will then interact with. On top of that, you can turn any of these into just general forums. I actually use this platform for my peer editing in my classroom. I can show you that at a different time. But really, we're grateful for Parlay for sponsoring this particular video in relation to synthesis, and we look forward to continuing our partnership with them. So you'll definitely want to check them out. But now that we've got that, we've mentioned Parlay. Once again, you can access them through the affiliate link right down below. Let's actually consider what we want to do for our prompt here today. And that is, or should I say for our video here today, and that is breaking down the synthesis prompt. I'm going to actually use a synthesis prompt that comes from thegardenofenglish.com. If you were to go to the free files and free files and resources and scroll down to the synthesis heading, you'll find the one that says Halloween. This is what we're going to use here. And you're going to notice that our prompt breakdown process is going to be very similar to the argument breakdown process that I covered in the video that is referenced right here, okay? And this process actually incorporates concepts that I discussed in another video called Arguing Ideas and Not Things, and that can actually be found up here as well. So you want to check those videos out, but if you don't want to, truthfully, you can pay attention now and you'll still get the gist of what happens there. But this is going to be a familiar process. It's good to break down the synthesis prompt in a familiar way because it's going to allow it to be much more manageable as we get into creating thesis statements and writing body paragraphs and selecting evidence and all those other great things for synthesis that we'll do in different videos. But let's actually read our prompt together, and then let's go through the steps of how to break it down. So just so you know, a synthesis prompt has three parts. They aren't always labeled. I've labeled these. They used to be labeled. Sometimes they just flow together. But there are always three parts. You're going to get introductory information, you're going to get the assignment itself, and you're going to get the directions with the citations. And that's exactly what you see here. So we're going to read this, and then we're going to break it down in our step-by-step format. So we have, it's inarguably human nature to explore the unknown. This desire has manifested itself as sailors set to the seas to search for new lands, and as, in more recent history, astronauts have broken through the atmosphere on quests to explore the observable universe. And yet, the unknown is not limited to concrete physical destinations. Rather, it extends to how individuals wrestle with the most enigmatic area of their lives, death. Throughout generations, artists have been at the forefront of exploring and reasoning with death in all of its forms, and this has rapidly increased recently due to the rise in consumption of entertainment. Ominous and foreboding creations have become remarkably profitable, especially around Halloween. Now, some argue that the consistent bombardment of horrific images and deathly contemplations is producing a society that is either overly anxious or desensitized, while others suggest that creating and consuming such media is just one of the ways that humans learn to deal with life and the inevitable end that claims all. Assignment. Carefully read the following 6 sources, including the introductory information for each source. Write an essay that synthesizes material from at least 3 of the sources and develops your position on how commercializing fear and horror affects the ways individuals respond to the unknown and the macabre. So there we go. There's our prompt. You'll notice there are some other directions down here, but honestly, we don't need to go over those right now. If you're a teacher, I suggest you do go over those with your student, but those directions at the bottom do never change. So you go over that once, and that's a constant, okay? But they're not going to help us as we create our argument right now, so we're going to kind of leave that alone as we plan this out. So what are the steps to break this down? Let's actually go through and say what the steps are. Step 1 is not the same as step 1 in the argument prompt breakdown, because step 1 in the argument prompt breakdown was, hey, identify the positions that show up in the prompt. We will do that, but we won't do that until later. Step 1 here is you want to collect ideas worth arguing. What does that mean? It means that you want to go throughout the whole prompt and you want to pick out language that either is an idea or relates to an idea. So what does an idea mean? An idea is something that is intangible. You cannot actually experience it with any 5 of your senses. So if there's any word or phrase in that introductory element that relates to an idea, we want to highlight that, and then we want to either A, circle it as an idea word, or take the phrase or the word and say, okay, what idea is related to it? So let's go through that. You'll notice that I actually already have this filled in right here down the side. But if I were reading this prompt, you'll notice I've highlighted up here the language that I would actually circle as getting to ideas that I want to talk about. And the reason why we want to highlight these ideas, just so you know, is because although our paper is going to talk about horror-based entertainment, what's really going to happen is we're going to argue the ideas that horror-based entertainment relates to. That's where our argument's going to be centered. We're just going to use horror-based entertainment to argue these ideas. So we want to argue ideas, not things, as my dear friend Crystal La Liberty says. So anyway, nonetheless, I'm going to go in here and I'm going to start circling all of the language that's abstract. And so you'll notice I've already highlighted these. One of them is human nature. You cannot actually tangibly touch human nature. It's real. We can experience it, but not through the 5 senses. Look at how I highlighted the word explore. The word explore actually brings me to a different idea, which is adventure. And so I highlighted adventure. And I also have the word, the phrase explore the observable universe. That too relates to adventure. So I want to just note that. Adventure. Desire is an idea, so I selected that. The unknown, that's certainly intangible. How can you actually tangibly experience the unknown? You can't, so it's an idea. It exists, but it's not actually able to be sensually experienced. Death is an idea. When something actually lacks life, right, or it ceases, that's the idea of death. That's what we label it. Artist. Notice that this is actually working as a person here, or a group of people, but that brings us to the idea of art itself. I have the word consumption highlighted, so consumerism is an idea, entertainment is an idea, consumer entertainment's the idea there. You can't tangibly touch consumer entertainment. You can watch a movie, you can turn on Netflix, but all of the idea that pervades behind that is consumer entertainment. Profitability, I can see money coming in, but profitability relates to economics. And then we've got this word, people becoming overly anxious or desensitized. And now we've got other ideas, anxiety, sensitivity. And when we talk about this idea of learning to deal with something, so I can actually highlight learning to deal with here, that relates to the idea of adaptation. So what I'm doing here is I'm just circling or highlighting these words. In this case, I'm highlighting it because I'm not using my drawing pad. But what I'm doing is I'm going to record them right in this box here. And I will explain why a little later. I've had some of these highlighted and some of them not highlighted. But I also don't want to neglect to go down to the assignment to see if there are any other ideas that show up there. And you're going to notice I've highlighted fear and horror. And if I wanted to, I could actually highlight the word individuals and put the word individuality at the bottom of my list here. So we're going to just add that as we speak. But that's our first step, because these are the ideas that are going to drive our paper. Now, please note, our argument in paper is not going to focus on every single one of these. We're just trying to say, okay, how can I start jump-starting my thoughts about what I'm going to have to do when I write this paper? The first place to start to get ideas is to locate ideas. It makes perfect sense, so let's do it. So the next thing that we're going to do is we're going to actually go to the springboard. And that is, we're going to look at other people's ideas about the ideas we're going to talk about. I know, confusing, right? But we're going to use them as a springboard. So we want to identify, just like we did in the argument prompt, what positions are presented in the prompt itself and what assumptions are presented in the prompt itself. And that's going to include the background and the assignment, okay? So if you were to actually read through this whole introduction, as we already have, you're going to notice that there are two positions. And that is like two very clear arguments that are stated. One of them is that horror-based entertainment negatively influences humans. That claim comes from this sentence right here, how some argue that people are becoming desensitized or overly anxious. The second claim that shows up there is that horror-based entertainment is a coping mechanism for those trying to understand the death or mysterious elements of life. Good. All of that checks out. Those are the those are the positions that are put in the information that comes before the assignment itself. Please note, though, some synthesis prompts have more than two positions in them. Some synthesis prompts only have one position in them. So this is something that does vary a little bit by prompt, but you will be able to pick out some positions at least, or at least some assumptions that are given to you. And this prompt is no different. This prompt has assumptions as well. So we're going to try to pick those out. When I read all of this information, I'm just like, okay, what does this actually infer? That means, imply. So that means that I can infer it about human nature. What can I assume based on what's said here? And you'll notice right here, it says it's inarguably human nature to explore. Well, the assumption that I would tie to that is that humans are adventurous by nature. Okay? We have a line up here about death being enigmatic. It's the most enigmatic area of people's lives. Okay, well, we're assuming that death actually is a mysterious part of life. Just because it tells us that, does that mean it's true? And I think about that, and I'm like, maybe it is, maybe it's not. But that's an assumption that's being pushed there. Notice that one of the perspectives talks about how this type of media makes people overly anxious or desensitized, or the other side says, no, it allows people to kind of cope with things. What that actually implies is that media in and of itself can influence individuals. And we'll actually see that same implication show up right here in what we're commanded to do, where it says, develop your position about how commercializing fear affects individuals, right? Well, we're assuming that commercial products and entertainment do affect individuals. So that's an assumption that is presented by the prompt. And then another assumption there is, because we know this is happening, it's assumed that people think that it's acceptable to profit off of horror-based entertainment. So all of these positions and assumptions did come from that prompt. Now, if you were only able to identify one of the positions in here, or just one of the assumptions, or just a few of these things, that's totally okay. I have a nice long list because I've done this a million times. We need to practice this. But the point is we need to actually make sure that we get our thinking about the topics and ideas done before we go into actually trying to say something about it, because otherwise we'll be saying something that we know nothing about. And we don't want that. We want to be planned and persuasive with what we're doing. So now that's going to bring us to step 3. Step 3 is the same thing that we would do on the argument prompt. We're going to take these positions and assumptions, and we're going to say, okay, what are my initial thoughts here? Do I agree with this? Do I not agree with these? Now notice, we're not actually addressing the assignment yet in terms of what we're going to write our paper about, but we're collecting our ideas once again to begin to be able to address that particular assignment. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to go and say, okay, the positions that are presented, do I agree or disagree? Number one, horror-based entertainment negatively influences humans. I have to admit, I'm extremely biased. I hate horror films and that kind of horror entertainment. So yes, I think it has a negative influence on things. If you disagree, totally cool. Make sure you put it in the comments and lambast me. That's okay. Right? We can agree to disagree on that one. Next, horror-based entertainment is an appropriate coping mechanism for those trying to understand death and maybe even be introduced to the concept of it or anything else like paranormal. Yes. Notice how I put a plus minus there? Yeah, we use art to kind of help deal with those mysterious elements of our lives, and I get that. I'm just wondering if it's always the most appropriate way to have conversations about those hard things or those mysterious elements. And so that's why I'm kind of like plus or minus there. Like I said, feel free to have your own differing opinions about this. This is just a model of how to break down a prompt for the argument that we're going to write. When it comes to the assumptions that are tied to this prompt, right? Humans are adventurous by nature. I'm like, that's absolutely true. Death is a mysterious part of life. And I could even put the paranormal. I could have probably put death in the paranormal here. But is a mysterious part of life? Yes, that's absolutely true. Popular media and consumerism influences how individuals respond to the world. I'm like, yep. Y'all are watching YouTube right now, aren't you? I mean, that's the proof right there. There's some sort of influence in media and how you do things in your own life. And then the last one, it's conceivably acceptable to profit off of horror-based entertainment. That's when I'm like, man, do we really have to do that? Aren't there better ways that we can explore these things? But like I said, personal conviction of my own. If you love horror films, you just love those horror films. That's quite all right. But notice, this is pretty simple. Do I agree? Do I disagree? And the reason why we do this is because this is going to allow us to say, okay, what position do I want to take here? If I notice that almost all of these positions put me kind of like in a negative, like I recognize my negative bias towards, horror, that's going to help me conceptualize my argument as we push forward and get the assignment itself. So how do we make sure that all of our ideas that we've thought about now relate to the actual prompt, right? Because what does AP stand for? It does not stand for advanced placement. It does not stand for anxiety and pain. It does not stand for apple pie. No, it stands for answer the prompt. So we need to make sure that we do answer the prompt, and we want to make sure that our ideas are organized enough to answer that prompt effectively. So how do we do that? Well, here's what we do. We find the command of the prompt itself. And in the synthesis prompt, you're going to always find that in the assignment portion, and it's going to start with the same word every time, develops. Okay? Now, in older prompts, it might not say develops, but with the new standard language on the AP exam, you want to look for the verb develops there, and you want to go to the end of the sentence. This is what you have to do in your paper. You need to develop your position on how commercializing fear and horror affects the ways individuals respond to the unknown and the macabre. That's your task. All right? So now I've got all these ideas about how, horror-based entertainment. I've got all these ideas about how media affects individuals, or I've thought about it. Now I'm much more well off in terms of being able to access this particular prompt. So once I find my command here, what I want to do is I want to go to step 5, which is create the conquer questions. These are questions that we want to make out of the command that we will have to answer. And we can know if we write a strong thesis that answers the prompt if we actually answer the questions that we can pull from this particular command. So what this is as follows. I'm going to go into my command, and I'm going to say, what can't I know until I've actually articulated my position? So do I know that we're already talking about the unknown and the macabre? Yeah, it says so right here. Do I know that we're also talking about commercializing fear and horror? Yes, it says so right here. Do I know yet how it affects the ways individuals respond? No, I don't know that effect yet. I have not identified that yet. So in my thesis, I'm going to have to identify that effect, okay? Do I know what ways individuals do respond to the unknown and the macabre? No, I don't. So look at what I have for questions here that I now know. I will write a strong thesis if it answers these questions. What effects does horror-based entertainment have on an individual's response to the unknown and macabre? That's the first question I need to make sure that I answer. And then number 2, what are the ways individuals respond to the unknown and the macabre? And then you'll notice that there is one other thing that I have to clarify, which is my position. So I could say, what is my position about this relationship here, how it affects. But I would like to point out, if I create a sentence that answers question 1 and question 2, my position will be directly articulated there, okay? So this third question is just a way for me to say, okay, is my position actually represented by answering questions 1 and 2? So once I create these questions, and it's really best to try to start them with the word what. You can use how and why for this type of a prompt, but what is always better because what is an easier question to answer. Why and how are kind of things that require more commentary, and that's for our body paragraphs. But our thesis that's going to guide our paper, let's answer these what questions. Now that I have my questions, I'm going to answer that, right? In the quickest sense, what's my position about how horror-based entertainment actually influences individuals and how do individuals respond to these sorts of things? You're going to notice that in my initial response, I just put marketing and normalizing fear and horror. That's through entertainment. Negatively influences moral development. So what's the effect here? I think that if you really are pushing this kind of horror agenda, there is a chance that there's going to be a negative effect on moral development. Now, like I said, you can disagree with that. I'm going to make that much more nuanced. This is rather kind of nebulous here, but don't not watch the videos because you disagree with how I approach horror films, right? I have plenty of friends that love them, but come and see my argument and see how it comes together so I can at least say, you can at least say, wow, is it even a reasonable argument at all? Now, one other thing I'd like to just point out is that with step 1, I'm going to go back because I do have all of these ideas from the prompt and some of these are highlighted. These highlighted ideas, I went through all of the ideas that I pulled from the intro and I highlighted the ones in this particular box for ones that I could tie into my synthesis paper, right? To be honest, I'm not going to write this paper about horror entertainment, about desire. I guess I could put adventure in there if I wanted to, but I'm like, that's kind of pushing it. Another thing that I'd like to just point out is this. When it comes to finding the ideas that show up in these particular in these prompts, if you want a list of universal ideas, I've actually provided you with one right here. So this is by no means exhaustive, but there are some lists right in this packet that you can access in the description right down below, and that right there is going to be able to provide you with a way to springboard into finding ideas in this as well. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to become full screen. I'd like to just point out one other thing. At the Garden of English on our website, gardenofenglish.com, we do sell posters, and this is a poster that makes that list I just showed you a little bit more aesthetically pleasing, so you can see that right here. I have these up on my walls. You can access those through our website. But don't forget, you do have free access to that list if you just get the piece from the description. Once again, we want to thank Parlay for sponsoring this video. Check them out by clicking on the affiliate link right down below. On top of that, the easiest way for you to help the Garden of English to grow, right, is to not only click links like that from our sponsors, but to also just click subscribe and just click like. And that really helps us as well. As always, you can check us out on the internet, thegardenofenglish.com. You can follow us on Instagram. We have a Facebook account. And we want to continue to grow with you and offer more support. So we're going to come back next time with talking about thesis statements for, next time we'll talk about, how we now look at sources, and then we'll get into how to produce thesis statements and body paragraphs and conclusions like we've been doing for every other essay type. So until then, I'll see you. Have a great one.